you have to make 161,000 or so. And that's when the non-compete doesn't apply without kind of more a formal request. Yeah, you're
Okay.
right.
I
Yeah.
don't come across, I don't know that I've ever come across any client that had a non-compete in nonprofit, but certainly in IT, sales, at the, depending on the size of the company, at the, VP level and up.
Yeah. We're seeing a little bit of, so occasionally we'll work with providers and they're curious as to if they're going to be able to move groups, because a lot of times, for example, if you're a heart surgeon at a major hospital in Spokane, for example, and then you want to do work at the other one that's a little closer to your house, or your group is shaking up a little bit and you want to move, there's questions now as to, hey, maybe I can do that, but I work for a hospital that's not for profit. So we'll see how it all
Huh.
shakes out. And there's also a lot of talk about, will the decision stick?
Right.
So what do you think, Kenneth? Do you think it's here to stay, or that there'll be it'll be going up to the Supremes?
I think it's going to be appealed. I don't know on what grounds it can be appealed in some cases because,
Why?
well, someone's gonna appeal it because things get appealed all the time. But I think the
Hmm.
analogy I was making before was when I left UPS, I was pretty much told I couldn't work at FedEx or another group like that because they were concerned I'd be sharing secrets,
Yeah.
which again, within the industry, there were things I still couldn't share, and I still can't share, honestly, up to this day. But I
Hmm.
was limited in where I could go. That's one of the reasons I went into consulting was I went from industry to industry, and there were no non-competes because I went from one industry to the other. It was a lot easier to do that. Um,
Hmm.
but I'd be curious for people that are on the call, what do you think about this? I mean, we're on Zoom now, so I'd love to get a sense of what everyone else has to think. I mean,
Yeah.
um, because I'm not a big proponent of it. I think that the employment lawyers are going to have a field day with this.
Hmm.
Well, Michelle Delore just said that at her last company, it applied to director level and above. And then David
Okay.
Solomon talked about how, higher up the ladder you get, the more intel you know. Um, I don't know. I
I
really
hope it
want it to not
stays.
stick. Yeah. So I want it to
Yeah.
stick. Yeah.
Me too. In medical sales, anyway, and I'm sure in many other industries, but this is really the one where I tend to live. Is it's also their way of not just preventing great talent to share trade secrets, but also sometimes they'll keep talent on through something like this, or just blackball them from being a great contributor to another company. And sometimes that the NDAs can be so all encompassing for a specialty that it really kills the momentum that maybe they were making with physicians, even if they go to a parallel product. So I really hope it sticks as well.
Well,
So how
I
would you
asked, I was
define it?
telling,
I was going to say, how
as
do you
a,
define a trade secret? Like if you're like when you're going to go from place to place, and Dave's put it in, is there a difference between an NDA and a non-compete?
Hmm.
I don't
I
know.
think I think NDA is the way to go. I,
yeah,
I
so
really
NDA is
do.
non-disclosure versus non-compete, right? Which that
Right.
feels like you could get everything you wanted without hindering people. Um,
Yeah.
I know two people. One was in device cardio, one was in device spine, um, in sales, and they both got paid by a competitor to sit on the bench for a year
Yep.
while until their non-compete expired. So it was a dream come true for them, but what a waste of company funds. I guess they didn't consider it a waste, but I thought, my God, they're paying high salaries to knowing they're not going to do a thing.
Yeah. Google did that a lot. They overhired, particularly in, like, I think it was like 2 years ago, and they were just couching people. And that's when that whole thing happened on social media, where people were like taking videos of their day, and like the first hour would be what cereal they were going to choose in the cafeteria, and everybody was in an uproar, understandably so. Um, but they were just keeping people from working other places, even if they didn't necessarily have work for them to do at the time. It's really interesting. Yeah.
So we shall see. For now,
Yeah.
it sticks, right?
I know Meta
it's a
had
done
that.
deal.
Meta had that issue too, because with a lot of people that lost their jobs at Meta that came to LHH, they were limited what they could actually even put on their resumes and what they could share because
Yeah.
of all the things going
Yeah.
on.
That's super hard. And I know when I write for people that are in research and development, it's super delicate in terms of what you can include. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, does anyone have any specific questions that are, the pressing questions that are going on with regards to their specific job hunt? Happy to talk through that. Otherwise, we can talk about things that we're seeing right now.
I mean, I'm actually monitoring the chat.
Same.
Again, if you guys want to unmute yourself, that's fine too. I mean, if anyone wants to chime in, we're a small crowd. I see. Can we talk about finding a good resume writer? Okay.
Yep.
So I'll let you guys go, Virginia and Claire.
Virginia, go ahead. Take it away.
Okay. So what's important to know about a resume writing is that there's no one size fits all. There's different kinds of models. There's people that have teams of writers that can fit you in right away, that are niche specific. There's people that have one-on-one practices. Some do things through questionnaires. Some people do things through conversations. The pricing is all over the map. So what I recommend people do is, number one, ask around, look at LinkedIn recommendations, look at Google reviews. There are some resume writing organizations that certify, sort of train and vet writers. You can look there as well for those directories. But most importantly, get on the phone, talk to these people, see if your personalities mesh. I don't think you need to work with someone who lives in your area. I think it's more important to work with someone that understands your industry, your job target. I feel like that's the main points that I'm thinking of. What would you add, Claire?
Alex said,
Yeah.
go ahead. He wanted, and this is getting military jargon transferred to civilian language. And I would take it a step further. There's so much jargon on resumes and acronyms that you can't assume that people will know what they mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are writers that specialize in military to civilian transition. I do that. Marisol Maloney does that. It depends on if you're targeting a federal role or a corporate role. If it's federal, you need a federal resume writer. So that's why working with someone that is, that knows your target. What would you say, Claire?
That I echo everything you shared. And I think something I don't want to glaze over is that feeling of fit. Because what I find is, particularly if you are in a role and you've been working for maybe 10 years in the career that you're in, or wherever, if you've been in your job for 10 years, very rarely do you have an opportunity to share and go back through everything that you've done in 10 years. And the thing is that it's not all pretty. That goes for everybody. There are learning curves that you had to get through. There are challenges that you had to get through. You likely failed and won many times. So I find that sometimes the interview process for a resume can bring up some vulnerable parts of our story. And so it really does make a huge difference when you find somebody that you feel comfortable with sharing your story, because you're going to talk about the good, the bad, and everything in between if you've got a great resume writer, and they're going to help to guide you in how to share that story as well once you have that document. So I would just add that. And the other piece too, if you can go with a specialist. So for example, if you're an executive, please seek out an executive resume writer. If you are somebody who is new to the job market or you're pivoting, work with somebody that you know and that other people have verified that know how to handle that pivot story. It really helps you to skip the line on all of the questions or explanation when you're aligned with somebody who is well-versed in the industry and in your stage of career. So definitely a couple things to consider. And the last thing I'll add is one of my favorite things that I think Virginia and I have gone back and forth on LinkedIn about this so many times, is if you call a resume writer and the answer is always, why, yes, you do need a new resume, you need to keep looking, because if you're talking to an expert, the answer will be probably something like, it depends.
Yeah.
Or, well, what are you trying to do? Or, well, when you send your current resume out, what's happening? Are you
Yeah.
getting interviews that you want? Or maybe you are getting interviews, but you're not closing the final interview, or you're not getting past the screening. So definitely make sure that as you're getting curious about the writer, they are getting curious about your situation, because that means that now you're working with somebody who's thinking critically about what situation you're in, and they can offer you solutions based on your unique situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Great.
David, go ahead. I mean, because you actually put something in the chat, so I was gonna.
Yeah, but this was
Yeah.
in response to something Claire said just before,
Mm.
what is, bringing something up that may not have a good memory on your resume. And my
Mm.
feeling is you wouldn't put something down on your resume that you wouldn't want to talk about. So I kind of disagree about a little bit with that, because it should be something that you're going to feel positive about, tells a good story about you, because you're trying to present your best foot forward. So, if it's
Mm.
surfacing something negative, it doesn't even belong on your resume, unless you got something very positive and you can just stick to that side of the story.
My counter to that, David, would be I have worked with many clients that came to me thinking that something was a negative. I'll give you an example. There was someone I worked with 2 years ago that had been thrown into a sales territory where
Mhm.
I think they were trying to manage them out. They gave him all of the crap accounts. And he didn't meet his quotas. His numbers didn't look great. But what we did was we controlled the narrative with that, and we said of all of these sort of dead in the water accounts, he actually managed to move the needle on 40% of them, something that no one else
Mm.
had been able to do. And so we turned what felt like a negative into something that was maybe not a home run, but it wasn't a failure. And so he started to feel better about it. So that's where, but I agree with you what you said about you need to be able to speak to everything that's on your resume, but sometimes a writer can help you to think about how to craft that narrative and be strategic about it.
Mhm.
Granted, in that sense, but again, you want to tell the positive story. In that
Sure.
case, you got a very positive outcome, even though it was a negative situation. But it
Yeah.
becomes a good story saying, here's what I did, given how
Yeah.
bad something was, right? And that's
Yeah. He
something.
didn't realize,
Mm.
yeah, but he perceived it as a complete negative. He's like, I don't even want to put it on
Mm.
there. And we said, well, we positioned it as an against the odds win. Because sometimes
I think
when it's
that's
your own
what's
blood, sweat, and tears, it's hard to see.
Yeah, that whole being so close to your story, and so much pride in who we are is wrapped up in what we do for work. Because, I mean, if we think about it, we spend 65% plus of our time at work usually in our life. So it can be really challenging sometimes to suss out, what would I want to present, even though I just came off my worst quarter yet, right? So, or me, I just got fired, right? And now I'm trying to figure out how in the world. So, something that's really important to consider when you are looking at working with a resume writer is, what does that interview look like? And ideally, if it were me, I would try and work with someone, if at all possible, especially if you're trying to tell a complex story, or you're trying to, like Virginia said, look at even the not so pretty parts of our career that we're a little bit anxious to talk about. And are we going to have a chance to walk through those things? Because a lot of times we don't necessarily see everything in the same light as somebody else would from their vantage point. So there's a lot to be said about what an interview can do during the process to really get you to bring out the details, but also to see the things that you might not be recognizing that can be those assets that you want to talk about. So that's a good point. Yeah.
And I know David asked about, is there any particular style resume you recommend for a manager, director, VP versus a line worker? I mean, I know that I've done some senior and director and VP resumes that are one page, and that's sufficient. But at the same time, I would say it has to tell your story, whatever that story is, and define it in the right way. you know, we have that whole discussion, how long should a resume be? And what should it
Mhm.
be? So I'm sure you and Claire, you and Virginia have different thoughts too.
Well, so my first thought when you're moving up the ladder, you're taking on more responsibility and you're sort of closer to um being responsible for some of the bigger picture. And so when someone wants to go from being more of a worker bee to someone who is in more of a leadership role, I like to make sure that I understand how each accomplishment ties back to the larger picture and the larger goal. It doesn't mean that you single-handedly saved the company and grew the stock, but it means that you contributed to something that maybe supported expansion, supported growth, grew the stock share. Um, sometimes sometimes you can even take it a level down and you can say, okay, I'm a VP of operations. What's the COO strategy? What's the C-suite strategy? What's his mandate or her mandate? How am I executing that and tying my work to them? And so it's just sort of we can pick it up a notch on the strategy level.
Yeah,
Help?
I echo that too. Yeah. The biggest thing, the biggest jump I see, especially when it's someone who's going from that sole contributor role, like a line worker, to now I'm going to be a people manager, is people want to know who they'll be following here, right? I mean, we are certainly in the age of culture fit and leadership values, and what does the company believe in that I want to follow or change gears? And so when it comes to a director or a VP or a manager of any kind, particularly when they're managing people, I always also like to include a leadership vision or something that sort of encapsulates who they are as a leader in addition to, so what Virginia is sharing is so, so important because the wins that you talk about are now going to be viewed in a different light, right? So if I was looking for a sole contributor, I'm looking for someone who is getting those results individually and they can prove those results. But now when they're transitioning to a leader of people, it's what are those results that are relevant to leadership and that are supporting the greater good or that are teaching others or setting up a systematic way so someone else can win too. So leadership vision becomes really important for me as well because I want people to really break out of the sort of the cookie cutter leadership statements that we see up on the motivational poster and really get down to who are they going to be in that leadership seat and why should we trust them and what problems do they solve and for whom. So as far as style, I would say if you can fit that in there somewhere, it's really important. And though it is wonderful to have a beautiful resume, it's so much more important what we're saying as well. So that is a really terrific question, David.
That is, and we all know that there's roles where maybe you're still an individual contributor, but you've moved up the ladder, so you're managing projects. And so then there's a lot of dotted line leadership. And so you need to treat it sort of like a people leader, with the challenge that you have to lead through influence. You don't control these people's paychecks or their bonuses. So you need to talk about how you're motivating and influencing and corralling lots of people. And again, how do those efforts tie back to the bigger picture?
Yeah. Yeah.
I see Jeff has a question. In today's environment, are you seeing it taking longer for folks to land new jobs or comparable jobs? What's the average time you're seeing? It's definitely taking longer from my perspective. I think there's a lot of different reasons why. I think every industry has its little things. I think that's a whole discussion. We can talk about the hiring process that isn't working well. We could talk about too many people applying for jobs. It is taking longer. And I think it's important to probably have a backup plan or something if need be. Because one of the questions I have for people is, what are you looking to do next? Are you looking to do the same job? If you're looking to do something else, then you have to reposition yourself. And that's part of, we talked about targeting companies, targeting people. So I think I mean, Jeff, if you want to unmute yourself, that would be great too, because I don't want to misread your question besides what's there. If there was anything specific you wanted to mention.
No, there wasn't anything specific. I was just curious to see what you're all feeling in the market right now.
Okay.
Well,
Mm.
I've been doing this through a lot of job career employment crises, and what I've seen is that whenever companies tighten their belt, they go through death by consensus and decision making. They add hoops to the process. They are more nervous about pulling the trigger on hiring. So I'm certainly seeing that. The other thing that I guess that I would say is that the closer your target is to what you did before, the more quickly people are landing interviews. And sort of the greater the pivot, the harder it is and the longer it takes.
Mm.
I don't
For
have
us,
an exact amount though, like a time
yeah,
frame.
it's really tough to pick a time frame. And every industry is so different, but I can tell you something that's been emerging in medical sales and in healthcare has been a huge uptick in fractional leadership roles. And if anyone is wondering what that is, it's where a company will hire on someone who is at the decision making level, like a C suite level, and they are on for a contract basis. So, whereas before, usually folks who I was working with who were targeting the C suite were looking for a full time role, now we're seeing a lot of fractional and multiple fractional leadership options. So it's an interesting market because it's people and companies saying, all right, we don't know if we're wanting to put our money down for a salary right now, but we do need someone who can help us fix a problem. And then often, if that person is successful, I'm seeing that they're getting offered to be full-time employees, even within the first month. Once people get them in to trust them, it's almost like an adjunct hiring, like out of a backwards interview hiring process. But that's been interesting. And then the other piece I will say, and I know this is not surprising anybody in this room because I bang this drum way more than I ever should, but networking is still the top way that my clients are getting their jobs. And not just networking by reaching out to people that they don't know yet at those companies that they're targeting, but also by networking with people that they do know, who and getting those warm introductions through people. And Virginia, I would love for you to share your ask a couple more tips because I use
My
it
rule
every
of
day with my
three,
clients. I
my
love it.
I was sharing with Kenneth, my daughter is about to graduate from college in 2 weeks, and she does not have a job. Her industry has been really hard hit. And so she is following the rule of three, and she is getting lots of informational interviews, and everyone is telling her, you're gonna get an interview. So it's been tough. But what you do is you think about, okay, this is the company I'm targeting. This is um who I know, who I need to know. And so let's say you could think of two people that you need to talk to. Um, every time you finish that conversation, you end it with, thank you so much. Can you think of names of two or three others that I should be connecting with? And have that put that sentence at the end of every conversation you have. It is the best way to expand your network and continue the networking process. Um, but yeah, in industries, it's always been the best way, I think, to land an interview, but it's been more important now than ever when you are getting postings with hundreds of applicants within 24 hours. You've got to try to bypass that as your first point of entry.
So
Mhm.
Scott, I see you had your hand up. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Hey, Scott.
Hello. Actually, since you're all here, I have a it's not related to the talk, but it just came up and I wanted an opinion of you guys on it.
Sure.
I had an email sent to me from a business association advertising a job, and it says to contact a particular person at the company. So I sent my resume.
Mhm.
And then I went through and looked. I saw that it was advertised on LinkedIn today. I got notice of it. So I went through and I found three contacts, three people that knew people I knew. So I sent them out for connection requests. But in the meantime, I
Great.
got a reply back from the lady saying, "Hi, Scott, I am in receipt of your resume for the planning position. Are you currently working? If so, would you mind applying on our website under the career section? This way we get you into the system, Jen." So does that mean that they're likely not to hire somebody who's not working or been in the field currently? Would you get the impression from that statement?
I'd say that's an interesting question she asked, and I'm a little bit skeptical of why she asked it. It might
Yeah,
be that. But I would, if it were me, I would follow suit and say, absolutely, Jen, happy to apply. Also going to attach my resume here. I know you've already got it. Always want to make sure it's at your fingertips. And then do apply on the company website. And then I would continue to network around that opportunity. Because the great thing is you've got your warm connection there with the person who said, hey, I do see your resume. Thank you so much. And so it's better than no connection at all. And then I would just continue to build if possible. And one way that you can get even more intel on the company and also on what it really is like to work there is you might actually reach out to some folks you can find who used to work at the company as well. A lot of times that can be a treasure trove of information. They're more willing because they're not currently under the banner of that company to share deeper insights. And then just remember, do take everything with a grain of salt, depending on how they exited the company. But I think that you're on the right track. Though I will say that is kind of an odd question she asked you.
I think
But
that's an issue with in this market. I mean, they ask the question, are you working, as though if you're not working, you're some damaged goods or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Or
think
maybe
that's
she
I don't
meant
like
it
that.
nicely, like it meant that you could instantly move in. Who knows? But I think you're smart to sort of gloss over and go, yeah, I'm always interested in opportunities.
Yeah.
And proceed.
Okay,
Thanks for
thank you.
sharing that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a
So
weird
Alex
things
has a
happen in
question
hiring.
here.
Yeah.
Alex, and if you can, I mean, it says, here's the question that no one wants to ask, but needs to be asked. What should we expect with pricing? Now, is that a pricing for a resume writer? Is that a pricing for a career coach? If you can unmute yourself, that would be helpful just to get some clarification.
Resume writing, she said.
Resume.
Okay.
Okay,
So
resume
it,
writing. I
it,
don't know if
look,
my mic
it
will work.
depends, right?
Okay.
It depends.
Oh.
There's $99 people, there's $3,000 people. It do you guys remember what it was, Claire or Kenneth? But it was like expect to pay 1%. It's like some math thing where you something like 1%
Of your salary or so?
every X amount of your salary you should devote to your resume writer, but I don't recall. The answer is it depends. I would
think-
work on finding some people you like
I
and
think you have to be careful.
Yeah.
Once you've lost a job or whatever, people will come at you left and right with all different offers and all different things to do. I think you really want to be smart about it. You want to have a conversation, look them up,
Yep.
because that's a part of it. I mean, as David says, you get what you pay for, maybe. I mean, that's sometimes
Mm.
true, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's
That can
not.
be.
I mean, it's really about building the relationship and making sure that the person you're working with is someone you trust. I think trust is such an important part of the
Yeah.
process, not just someone
Mhm.
who's going to basically give you a template that you could probably get on your own.
Yeah.
yeah.
And someone who
And maybe
actually
you're
is able
getting
to listen.
interviews. If you're getting interviews and you don't need a resume, you focus your money on an interview coach. So
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it varies greatly. And so when you go into interviewing these different resume writers, go in with questions about what else is included. And what I can tell you, and Virginia and Kenneth, is that we know many of the best resume writing groups out there. Like we're all friends in the back channel.
yeah.
If anybody's wondering, it's a huge family, okay? By and large. And what I know about these people is that they generally, if they are the type that do the interview, they get on the phone, they give you the time, they're asking you great questions, you will find someone that you gel with should you interview with a few of them. And depending on who it is, you may get perks that even go beyond what you were expecting. So, other things you could ask about, and not that everybody supplies this, but other things you can ask about are, well, after the resume is done, can you connect me to some of these recruiters that you trust? Or do you work in conjunction with other career coaches that might be able to help me with interview prep or job searching or mindset? Or, hey, do you know anybody in this market that you specialize in? Would you mind connecting us once the transaction is over? And a lot of times, there are a lot of these other additional valuable things that far surpass the investment as they fast track you to where you want to go next. So do come with questions and know that everything's not black and white, but the idea that you get what you pay for is absolutely true. So if you're going in and you're expecting to just fill out a template or a questionnaire and you throw like $100 at this thing, it will look different compared to a resume that comes from a nationally certified group that has been vetted with tons and tons of reviews, just like anything else. So if you can go off reviews, and if you go in asking the tough questions about what else is in this package, or what are the results that you typically see with your clients, you'll feel a lot better about making that decision, because you will see which resume writer gels with you the best and which is the best option for you. Yeah.
And if the budget or the timing
Sure.
doesn't work, most of us know people that we can introduce
Yeah.
you to. So
Yeah, like for
Oh, yeah.
example, I can look at a resume and take a first pass at it, but it's not my expertise. And I won't try to bluff my way through it. I mean, I could, but what's the benefit? Because it's me.
Yeah.
So I'd rather
Right.
reach out to other people. You know, we're having a whole conversation offline here about someone that was looking for a very specific specialty, even with LinkedIn. And I don't do that specialty, but I'll recommend
Yeah.
other people that do,
yeah.
because it's, you know, again, and it's your reputation on the line too. I don't want,
Right.
I want to work with as many people as possible, but it has to be a relationship that's built on trust as much as anything else.
Yeah. And a lot of us, you know, we went through our fire or went through our roller coaster in our career, you know, and so just know that for the most part, people who do dedicate their life and career to telling other people's stories generally have big hearts. They've been through tough places too. And so just know that there are really good quality people out there. And for example, Virginia and I know a ton, Kenneth knows a ton. And often, if someone comes to us and it's not the right fit, we will share the next person that you should talk with that might be the right fit, because we know all of them. So
Yeah.
Feel free to ask all those questions, you guys. That's a great question.
That's
Yeah.
a really good question.
I know. Yeah.
It's a hard question for some people to actually ask.
Sure.
I mean, I understand that part of it, because, you know, we all get asked the same question. It's like, okay, these are great services. Now here comes the how much, or
Mhm.
what do you
Yeah.
get? And, you know, I don't want to hedge, but my answer back is, tell me what you're looking for specifically, because there is no $1 amount or one right thing. Maybe it's something where you work with someone for hours versus a project price. Again, every situation is different.
Yeah, it's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So true. Oh, can I add one more thing to that?
Sure.
One thing I would also recommend is that if you have like 3 resume writers lined up that you want to talk to, and I highly recommend that you do shop, just like anything else. That fit is
That's
really
right.
important. We cannot stress it enough.
Mhm.
If you do, take a moment and look at their website, because I can't tell you, most people who call me initially, they go through our questionnaire, so they are privy to the pricing. Our pricing is between $1,000 and $3,000. It depends on what you need. But
Okay.
if you go and look at the pricing ahead of time and it's available on their website, then you can do a lot of that legwork in the beginning, and you'll know like, oh, this is what I can expect and what we're going to be talking about in terms of level of investment, and you won't feel so caught off guard. And like Virginia shared, there are people from 100 to 5,000, you know, I mean, like depending on what it is and generally how much coaching is included after the fact. So
Right.
do check out the website ahead of time. It will save everybody some time, and definitely set expectations from the get-go.
Yeah, and ask for samples.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, if you don't have the same level of money, there are people that are probably right for you also. I mean, what you don't
Mhm.
want, you want to focus on your priorities. I mean, one of the biggest issues I see with people when they send me resumes is they haven't really thought through what they want to even include on a resume as a
Mhm.
starting point. You know, forgetting about getting into the weeds. If you really can't explain, and I'll say this with Leah Harris. I said, if I don't understand what you want to do, it's very hard for me to really help you with a resume outside of just doing some general stuff. I mean, you have to tell me your story in a very general way.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
that's-
yeah, and I think sometimes I think it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how these documents get read. Not even, maybe our own mothers, but nobody else is going to look at your document with that fine tooth comb to say, oh, based on this, this is the kind of role that I could see them in my organization. We're dealing with hiring managers and decision makers that are looking at dozens of resumes, and you need to spoon feed to them what you're targeting, why it makes sense, you're a good fit, and what are the accomplishments that back. If there's any question, you won't get past the first read usually.
And I think it's important, like for you and Virginia, Claire, this is not a 1 hour conversation necessarily. I mean, with what you're doing. I mean, for some other people it might be. And so that's kind of, again, you may go back and forth and may have meetings and may have changes and all that stuff, which is part of it, as opposed to here's your sample after an hour.
Yeah.
There's a whole process which I'm not as privy to as you
Yeah.
are, but I'm sure
Oh,
that
yeah.
that's
I
something that-
spend 10, 15 hours to write a resume and a LinkedIn profile.
Same. We're about 12 to 13. I remember, Virginia, you asking me that a couple of years ago
Oh yeah?
when we were kind of forming up our system. Yeah, and you said, well, how much time is it? And I went, well, I mean, the writing time takes me honestly about, 9 to 10 hours. And you were like, well, but what about the going back and forth, the editing process? Then you've got to format it. Then you've got to spend at least an hour researching the target. That's really, really important, because if we're sharing our story and it doesn't connect to what our target cares about, you may as well just send them a thank you card and I'll try again later. Like it's all about that target. So,
Right.
yeah, it does come in right around 12 to 13 hours, but it's well worth it, with that deep dive.
And
And
then
also, I see Alex mentioned
Yeah, it
here.
looks like you had a horrible experience.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm
And
gonna give you I'm gonna give you an example of the differentiator. Someone reached out to one of our groups and said, there's a person that wants to have their LinkedIn profile written for them, giving the information. And we all said, we don't do that. We work with people on their LinkedIn profiles to bring out a story. And there are a lot of places that it's like here's the same LinkedIn profile for 40 people in an office, and it has to be tailored a certain way. And that thing, I mean, which is different, like a resume. You can have a boilerplate resume. It goes out to 15 or 20 different types of the person, as opposed to spending the one-on-one time. And that's why, like, from our standpoint, we want to clarify, what are you looking for, each person? And the more you know, the better that we can help you, or at least point you in the right direction.
Yeah. LinkedIn writing has really gotten much more complex than it used to. Gosh, 10 years ago, I could knock it out in an hour and a half.
Well,
Take like 3 times that. Yeah.
It's everything with
Sure.
AI now. And there's so many AI things out there that you have to learn to steer clear of. We actually had an issue with Leah Harrison where 2 people had the same LinkedIn About section, word for word from AI, and they were knocked out by a recruiter. They were knocked out by a recruiter. Now, we didn't write the section, but again, that's like, you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
And you have to tell a story.
And at this point too, it's pretty easy to spot, luckily, knock on wood. But I hate to hear that.
It's just slightly not human. I think we've talked about this before. AI is a great starting point, but do not let it be your finish point. It has to be heavily edited. It needs to feel like you. Run it by your mother, see if they think that or someone knows you well.
Yeah.
But I know when I write LinkedIn back to just researching the target, LinkedIn has become so algorithm driven that I do a deep dive of all the keywords associated with that target and then compare them to what's on LinkedIn's, what the database seems to be pulling up. And then I start writing only after I've gathered all that information.
Yep. That's a great point, and I want to emphasize something there, because a lot of times we will go to ChatGPT or wherever, and we say, create us this thing. Here's the prompt. I found this great prompt, and we think it's going to win the day. The trouble is, what if you're not sure what parts of your story to prompt it with, right? So I had somebody come to me a couple weeks ago, and they tried this process, and they said, I found this amazing AI prompt, and I put in all these parameters about how I wanted it to write me a LinkedIn profile and all this, that, and the other. I'm like, okay. So did it sound like you? And he goes, well, yeah, I mean, from what I gave it. And I said, okay. I said, well, the thing is that sometimes, kind of going back to the way we sort of chatted about things earlier, is that sometimes it does take that person to spotlight pieces of your story that you may not think are important. And here's what I find about people who are really successful in their career. Generally, as a rule, and normally I'm a it depends kind of gal, as you know, but in this case, generally what I find is that people who are successful through their career in different places where they work, they generally have something special about them, or a gift or a talent or something that they do, or a way they do business that seems really common sense. They're like, oh, everybody would know how to do this, right? Or like, this is just natural. Everybody would treat people this way. Guys, I am not kidding when I tell you, most people do not know how to do what you do that comes so naturally to you. And that's why it's so, so, so important to get with somebody who can play your story out with you and say, oh, I know you feel like it's really simple and you would just systematize how you planned your wedding last year with a Kanban board in Notion. But if you had suggested to me that approach in 2013, I would have told you you were crazy. So honestly, if you have a chance, even if you're just plugging and playing your story, before you ever hit ChatGPT, do know that sometimes we don't see in ourselves the brilliance that others find so valuable because it comes so naturally to us. And that's just the human condition. Oh, I see your hand up. Hey.
Yeah, Clara,
That's the secret sauce.
Clara,
The
based upon
secret sauce.
based upon
Yeah.
what you're saying, usually the resumes these days are about accomplishments. What you're talking about are soft skills. Do you want to hide, leadership is a soft skill, right? Because it's, you're helping your assistant. So the question becomes, is there a balance? What should you be highlighting more than the other when you look at this? Is it depending upon the type of role? Is it also dependent upon if you want to try and move up from manager to director to VP? Are you highlighting one more than the other? Because it is still always about what did you bring to the company, and some kind of benefit, value add, and it's usually in something that represents dollars or something else, as opposed to the soft skills that you're talking about. So just if you can clarify a little bit more on that.
Yes, this is my favorite topic, and I'm so glad you asked. So what I would term this is, what is the systematic way that through your career, through company A, B, C, and even in college, you got results? And you're right. There are a lot of soft skills at play. And then the key is, what hard skills did I pick up along the way? What measurable accomplishments can I attribute to using that system that I have, that I've used? And how will that translate to what's important to the target? Because if we think about our resume as a sales document, the best sales and marketing materials are the ones that speak directly to the challenge that the customer or the ideal customer is facing. So in my eyes, when you are thinking about what is the priority, is it soft skills? Is it hard skills? Is it hard metrics? Is it leadership vision? The bottom line is, what does the target need to know about you that will say, hey, this person, David, can solve our problem today. And This is how he does it. And here's a historical representation of him doing something very like it or the exact same thing. So we call it your system for success. It's truly, it takes a bit of sussing out. And this is where that interview comes in handy, because many times people can go their entire career without recognizing that they look at things systematically in a way that nobody else does. I just worked with a CEO yesterday. She's in her third C-suite position and now going to be a fractional leader. And as we're on the phone for 45 minutes, she mentioned how she does product mapping over 16 times. And I said, you know, I think you're an expert in product mapping. Can you walk me through that process and how you get companies to go from A to B with the way that you do business? And she could rattle it off like that. And I said, wow, that's really unique to you. And she goes, oh no, I'm sure everybody does it this way. David, I'm telling you, nobody does it this way. Lisa is a rock star in this particular area. And so then we looked back through her career, and lo and behold, she had handled problems like this at 3 different biotech companies, but she had never thought of it like that. So I would say, to answer your question, when it comes to what gets priority, I would always err on the side of doing the research on what you want to do next, whether it's if you can get your hands on the actual role, and even further, if you can talk to somebody in that company and say, what's going on here? Like, what really are the challenges? And what are you hoping that this person will be able to do? You can even look at the quarterly statements and the financial reports of every quarter for public companies to find this stuff out. And then think about your experience. What have I done, and how do I approach things that would be relevant to solving that challenge? And that's where I find the most powerful resumes emerge.
Very interesting in the sense, because my role is a business relationship manager / IT business partner.
Okay.
My role basically is to identify, plan, and implement technologies for businesses. Now, when I look
Awesome.
at what I do, my resume talks to some of the skills and it talks to accomplishments. It does not
Mhm.
really talk to the soft parts that go into all the relationship management. I'm still
Okay.
looking at the same role, maybe even higher at times, but it's how to identify and balance that, because do I get noticed? Yes, I do. Is it all the time? Obviously not, but still in all, I've got the accomplishments that I think show that I've done some good things along the way, but
Mhm.
it's none of the softer things that you're presenting, and you're presenting an interesting case. So just bringing that out. Yeah, Virginia.
Yeah, so David, I actually just wrote for a gentleman who is a CIO now, but prior to that, he'd been in IT operations. He was a service delivery manager with a top tier consulting company. And in the way back in the day, he managed a help desk. So he'd, been super techie all the way up. And sort of like what Claire was saying, he's talking to me about his accomplishments, and it's occurring to me that no matter how junior or senior his role is, he sort of has a rinse and repeat formula that I don't even think he clued in on yet, but it was what's going on with the people, what's going on with the process, what's going on with the technology. And so what we did was I said, look, this is what I'm seeing. And he's like, yeah, you know what, you're right. And so we, the kind of the top of the resume says CIO, and then we wrote people, process, and technology. And in his branding at the top, we referenced how he always approached each role with a multi-pronged approach that focused on people, process, and tech. And then with each of the jobs, that's how I organized his achievements. Here are the people ones, here are the process ones, here are the tech ones. And so it enabled me to show soft skills and hard skills within the context of achievements.
I love that so much.
I think what you're going to find on conversations like this is the words, it depends. There is no right or wrong way to do any of it. And it may even depend on the role, it may depend on the person. And so when someone tries to put you or boilerplate or put you pigeonhole you into one thing, that's not beneficial because you're just going to look like everyone else. And I think the idea of having a conversation like this it's brainstorming. You know, we're, you know, and you know, we all like to learn from each other with this because and I say this all the time. It's true. I learn from everyone all the time.
Same.
Which is the most important thing of all.
Yeah. Same.
Oh,
Thanks for opening my eyes. I'll just put it like that.
Love you
Especially
guys.
what I'm gonna
yeah,
do.
I
with
like
that.
what Michelle
Yeah.
said. I think sometimes we are too close to the subject and we can't see the patterns. And that's
Yeah.
very true.
$1,000,000%. I didn't write my
Perfectly said.
resume.
Same.
But yeah, there's no
No.
way I'd touch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know.
That's funny you say that, because I have an actual system that now I use and talk about. It's called our Triple S system. This is literally what I use. And it wasn't until 2 years ago that I even realized that it was there. I had been always doing the steps, but I had never cemented it down into a how I achieved this. And the abridged version of my career is recruiting, went into medical sales, 5 layoffs. Here we are today. Ta-da! And what happened was I kept repeating this process and kept getting back and back and back in. But I had never taken the time until I was working with a business coach. And she said, well, walk me through it. And voila, there is an actual systematic process that I follow that I didn't even recognize because for me, it was just how I did it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like the shoemaker who doesn't
Shoemaker.
fix his own shoes. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Totally.
it's no different than if
Absolutely.
you're having work done around your house. You wouldn't try to do it yourself, if you're not good at it. I did not do my resume either. When I did my LinkedIn profile, I made all the mistakes that everyone else makes because I didn't know better. I figured
Sure.
this is the way to do it. I mean, we all kind of learn from each other that way. So, you know, I hope this was a very valuable call to everyone. I thank you all very much for attending today. This is actually being recorded. And what I'm doing is I'm going to save the chat also while we're doing this. I haven't had to say that in a very long time.
Weird. How do you do that? I don't even know how to save the chat.
Well,
How do you
if
do
you
that?
go
Oh, I
under
see
three
save chat. Yeah, I
dots,
see
it
it now.
says save the chat.
That's how you can do that. Learn something new.
Oh, that's great.
3
Awesome.
dots, save the chat, and then we can post the chat up maybe on the event, let's say, and people can look at it because we used to do that all the time when Zoom first started. Put your LinkedIn URLs in there and save the chat and connect later on or whatever it was.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah, so we used to
Right,
do
so
that. So
how do
we-
you, where does it go when,
It
You
goes
go-
to
like,
your
does it go to the
Zoom-
cloud?
Zoom
it'll
folder.
go to it'll
Okay.
be a
The
text
local Zoom
file.
folder.
It'll be a text
David's-
file.
The IT guy is shaking his head. Okay, it's a text file.
It's a text file. Then you can take
Thank
it
you.
and then you can look at
And then you can just
everything
do a
on.
control F and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey,
awesome.
Michelle,
Thank
how are
you.
you?
Hey, Ken, are you still going to be doing these? I know you're
We-
pivoting on some other. of
no,
your-
I'm not doing the
Disney.
Tuesday ones anymore. I'm going to be doing other events.
But are
You
you
stuck
keeping
with
this
us.
one?
Yeah, we do this every month.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah, I
first
know
time we
you
did.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We
Haven't
alternate
seen a
video
while.
and audio.
Oh, okay.
We're not, yeah, you
I
don't
think
get
I've
out of
only
it,
been
Dennis.
Good try, Kenneth.
Yeah.
Michelle and I used to work together at Bed Bath & Beyond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, get
I'm
outta here.
sorry. I
Yeah.
miss you so much.
I know. Such a shame.
Oh, man.
No, it was a
Dang.
good place. I have all those coupons.
Oh, no.
Oh,
I know so many
those are the
people
best.
who have them, and I think they use them as dartboards now. So,
There you go.
Oh, man. Well, thank you guys so much for coming.
you very
It's such
much.
a joy to
Yeah,
see you. Thank you for your great questions.
great
Really, truly
questions.
Yes.
good ones today. Great.
Thank you for
So
the-
happy job hunting. Hang in there,
Take
guys.
care.
thank
Thank
See you
you.
next
Yes.
month.
Go get them.